Welcome back to Galaxy Recaps. Today we'll be diving into an action thriller film titled Ad Vitam. Enjoy the recap. The film kicks off with Frank, a skilled mason, hanging from the side of a towering skyscraper, inspecting cracks in the building's cement alongside a colleague. The next morning he takes his pregnant wife Leo to the hospital for a routine checkup on their unborn child. But when they return home they find their apartment ransacked. Leo is visibly shaken. This isn't the first time their place has been broken into. She demands answers, but Frank plays dumb, pretending he has no idea what's going on. Without wasting time, he rushes off to meet his friend Ben to discuss the unsettling situation. The following day at work, disaster strikes. While Frank is suspended midair, someone cuts his safety cable, sending him into a free fall. Acting on pure instinct, he barely manages to save himself. Scrambling for a grip before plummeting to his death, he quickly gives chase to his would-be assassin, but the man vanishes without a trace. Shaken but determined, Frank rushes home to check on Leo. Later that night as she sleeps, he sneaks out onto the rooftop and retrieves a hidden key, one he's been secretly keeping for years. As he stashes it in the bathroom, Leo catches him in the act. Before she can press for answers, danger arrives. A ruthless assassin named Vanaken and his men storm the apartment. Frank fights back with everything he's got, but they overpower him. Both he and Leo are bound and threatened. Vanaken demands something Frank possesses. When he refuses, they knock the couple unconscious and abduct them. Flashback, 10 years earlier. Frank and Leo are fresh graduates from France's elite police training program. At the ceremony, a senior officer hands Frank his father's old badge. The back of it bears a single Latin word, ad vitam, meaning for life. Another memory surfaces, Frank's first encounter with Ben during training. While Frank and Leo train side by side, Ben joins through the military division. He's a natural at parkour, moving effortlessly across rooftops and ledges. During a boxing match between the military recruits and police cadets, Ben squares off against one of Frank's teammates, proving his raw strength and skill. By the time their training nears its end, Ben must pass a live fire test, his target, Frank, who wears a safety vest for the exercise. Ben pulls it off with precision, securing his place in the GN unit. Their bond solidifies when Frank pins the badge onto Ben's uniform, wishing him luck for the future. On graduation night, the team celebrates with one final party. Amidst the drinks and laughter, Leo and Frank share a moment, one that quickly turns into something more. Their friend Nico notices and teases Frank relentlessly. Even later, when they retire to their rooms, Leo finds her way back to Frank, sealing their connection. The group reunites at a barbecue where Nico playfully urges Frank and Leo to get married. 9 years later, Leo calls Frank with life-changing news. She's pregnant. But before she can say the words, Frank is interrupted by another call. A hotel bellhop frantically reports gunfire in one of the rooms. Frank and his team spring into action, racing to the scene. Without waiting for backup, they gear up, donning bulletproof vests and masks before storming the hotel. Frank quickly identifies two suspicious men and moves to stop them, but they open fire. Chaos erupts. In the crossfire, Ben takes a bullet. Meanwhile, Nico grapples with one of the suspects in a brutal struggle. Frank reacts fast, taking out the first gunman to save Nico, then immediately firing at the second, who has a hostage at gunpoint. But the victory is short-lived. Amid the fight, Nico sustains a fatal neck wound. He collapses, bleeding out in Frank's arms, his life slipping away as the team watches in shock. Frank's world crumbles when his gun is confiscated, and he's stripped of his badge. The blame for Nico's death and Ben's injury falls squarely on his shoulders. Fired and disgraced, he packs his things and visits Nico's wife before leaving. Overwhelmed with guilt, he breaks down in tears. Later that night, Leo attends Nico's funeral, offering comfort to his grieving widow. Frank watches from a distance, his heart heavy as he sees Nico's children struggling to process their loss. He notices Leo in deep conversation with her senior officer. When they return home, she drops a bombshell. She's resigned from the unit. She wants a fresh start, a life with Frank away from the dangers of their past. Determined to make amends, Frank visits Ben, taking full responsibility for what happened. But Ben won't hear it. He refuses to let Frank carry the guilt alone, admitting that in his place he would have made the same call. But the damage is done. His gunshot wound left him permanently disabled, making him unfit for duty. Trying to move on, Frank and Leo grow closer, officially starting their life together. They move into a modest apartment, unpacking their belongings piece by piece. Among the boxes, Frank stumbles upon his blood-stained badge, the blood of one of the suspects from that fateful night. Something about it doesn't sit right. Curious, he takes the badge to a forensic lab for analysis. The results shake him, revealing the true identities of the men they killed. The so-called criminals weren't just random suspects, they were secret agents, often used as pawns in high-stakes political games. Realizing the gravity of what he's uncovered, Franck turns to Ben. He shares the explosive information, but Ben warns him against digging any deeper. This is bigger than them. If he values his life and Leo's, he needs to walk away. But Franck can't let it go. Instead, he locks away the forensic report and badge in a secure locker, stashing the key on the rooftop. Hidden from everyone, even Leo. Time passes. Franck and Leo try to settle into a normal life. They attend Nico's younger son's birthday party, where Nico's widow confides in Franck. Her older son holds him responsible for his father's death. Troubled, Franck pulls the boy aside to clear the air. But Nico's son isn't ready to forgive. He wants the truth, the real truth, about who killed his father. Until then, Franck will never earn his forgiveness. Haunted by regret, Franck takes a risk. He contacts a journalist, handing over the classified information anonymously. Meanwhile, in a world of political shadows, two intelligence agents brief a high-ranking minister about the hotel shootout. They piece together the real story. On that night, a CIA agent named John Brennan had arrived to negotiate a secret weapons deal. The men Franck and his team took down weren't just criminals. They were DGSI agents, sent in covertly to monitor the transaction. Brennan uncovered their presence, leading to a deadly firefight. The DGSI agents killed him and his people. Desperate to escape, they crossed paths with Franck's Special Forces unit, leading to the tragic shootout that cost Nico his life. But there's a catch. The journalist Franck entrusted wasn't who she seemed. She was one of their own, a planted agent ensuring the truth never reached the public. Now the minister is left with one problem. Franck still has the proof. To silence him for good, the minister enlists the ruthless assassin Vanaken. Back in the present, Vanaken receives confirmation. His men have Leo. Watching her live footage on his phone, he smirks. The hunt for Franck is just beginning. Realizing he has no other choice, Franck agrees to hand over the badge. His captors release him near his apartment, bloodied and exhausted. He washes his face, pulls up his hoodie, and blends into the crowd. But as he approaches his building, he spots flashing lights, police swarming the area. Thinking fast, he scales a tall pipe along the side of the building, making his way up to the rooftop. From there, he maneuvers down to his apartment window and forces his way inside. He rushes to the bathroom, his secret hiding spot. But the key is gone. Before he can react, a police officer catches sight of him. With no time to waste, Franck delivers a swift kick, knocking the officer off balance and bolts for the rooftop. Gunshots ring out as the cops open fire, but Franck leaps across to the adjacent building, disappearing into the night. Desperate for help, he tracks down Ben at his children's training center. Franck spills everything, what's happening, who's after him, and that the real badge is missing. Ben quickly devises a plan. They'll smear Franck's blood onto Ben's badge and use it as a decoy. With no better option, Franck agrees. After setting the trap, Franck calls Vanaken, confirming he has the badge. Vanaken instructs him to meet at a specific location. Ben rides with him on his bike but departs before Vanaken's men arrive. Soon, a car pulls up. The men order Franck to follow. Franck is led to Vanaken, who isn't about to make this easy. Before handing over the badge, Franck demands to see Leo. They take him to an open clearing where she's restrained beneath a tree, injured but alive. Without hesitation, Franck retrieves the badge from under his bike seat and hands it over. Vanaken smirks, sending out a mass message to all of Franck's contacts, a fake suicide note to frame his death. Then, without a second thought, he orders his men to kill both Franck and Leo. Just as the execution is about to happen, a sudden noise from the bushes distracts the killers. One of them steps forward to investigate. Moments later, gunfire erupts, except it's not aimed at Franck. The man turns his weapon on his own crew, eliminating them in an instant. He pulls off his mask. It's Ben. Wasting no time, Ben and Franck seize the fallen men's weapons and head toward the building where Vanaken is finalizing things with the minister. Inside, Vanaken hears the distant gunshots. He immediately senses trouble and attempts to contact his men, but it's too late. Franck and Ben are already inside, taking down two more guards in rapid succession. Franck makes a break for the cars outside, hoping to escape, but Vanaken spots him. Gunfire erupts, forcing Franck into cover. He returns fire while Ben hotwires a vehicle. As soon as the engine roars to life, Franck jumps in and they speed off, Leo gripping her wounded arm beside them. Vanaken and his men aren't giving up. A high-speed chase ensues, bullets flying as Leo, despite her injury, grabs a gun and returns fire. Just as she takes down one of their pursuers, a bullet grazes her arm. But that's not the worst of it. She suddenly goes into labor, realizing they can't outrun them. Franck makes a split-second decision. He jumps out of the car, drawing Vanaken's attention toward him. Grabbing a weapon, he engages in a vicious shootout, trading bullets with Vanaken, who fires from inside his moving car. As the chaos unfolds, two police officers on dirt bikes arrive. But before they can intervene, Vanaken ruthlessly guns them down. Franck seizes the opportunity, grabbing one of the fallen police officers' dirt bikes and tearing off into the dense jungle. Behind him, Vanaken wastes no time. He jumps onto the second bike and speeds after him, hot on his trail. Meanwhile, Ben and Leo are still being relentlessly pursued by two cars. Leo is in full-blown labor, pain racking her body with every passing second. Ben, gripping the wheel tightly, does his best to keep her calm, urging her to hold on just a little longer. Franck races through the thick trees, pushing the bike to its limit. But as he bursts out of the jungle, he's met with an even bigger problem. A full police blockade spread out across the open fields. With nowhere to run, he veers back into the jungle, desperate to shake them off. Vanaken, however, is relentless. He doesn't follow Franck into the trap. Instead, he takes a shortcut, heaping tabs on Ben and Leo instead. From a distance, he positions himself and fires at their car. Bullets whiz past them, shattering the windshield. Ben reacts fast, swerving violently to avoid getting hit. He presses on the gas, narrowly escaping. Knowing Leo's condition is worsening, Ben calls Franck, his voice filled with urgency. She can't hold on much longer. What do I do? Franck, still fleeing from the cops, gives him a single desperate instruction: get her to the hospital. Now, back at the Special Forces unit, their commanding officer receives word of the high-speed chaos unfolding across the city. Wasting no time, he mobilizes a task force, setting out to track them all down. Meanwhile, Vanaken locates Franck in the air and takes aim at his paraglider, his last-ditch attempt at escape. A single well-placed shot could send him crashing to his death. As fate would have it, all parties collide near the hospital. Vanaken's men attempt to ambush Ben, but Ben turns the tables, taking them out one by one. Yet even with bullets in him, Vanaken refuses to go down. He staggers toward Ben and delivers a brutal beating, knocking him to the ground. Franck, still airborne, crashes down onto Vanaken at full force, knocking him away from Ben. The two engage in a vicious hand-to-hand fight, exchanging devastating blows. Just as Franck gains the upper hand, sirens blare all around them. The special forces have arrived. Surrounded, Franck surrenders. But before they can take him in, he rushes to the car, pulling Leo, barely conscious and bleeding, from the back seat. Seeing the dire situation, the officers lower their weapons and allow him to carry her inside. Leo is rushed into emergency surgery as Franck is taken into custody and locked in a holding cell. Hours later, the news breaks. Leo has safely given birth to a healthy baby. She visits Franck in his cell, holding their newborn in her arms. But she hasn't come empty-handed. In a shocking twist, it is revealed that during Vanaken's invasion, Leo secretly took the real badge. She had it all along, keeping it hidden until the right moment. She hands it over to the police, and soon the truth spreads like wildfire across national news. With the real evidence now in the hands of the authorities, Franck is proven innocent and set free. As he steps outside into the open air, Leo and their baby wait for him in a public square. He walks toward them, eyes filled with relief and gratitude. Leo smiles. He reaches for his child. The nightmare is finally over. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.